The chilly March morning of 2006 began with an unusual disturbance on Amherst Street. In the suburbs of Winchester, Virginia, 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a modest 2-story red brick house at the bottom of a fog-covered slope. Neighbors peered through curtains as tactical geared officers fanned out around the area, silent and prepared for a meticulously planned arrest. Inside, Robert Barrington, 73 years old, was pouring his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained for years as a retired engineer, a respected neighbor, and an active member of the local church. A loud and urgent knock echoed at 7:24 a.m. Robert Barrington, Virginia State Police. We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the disappearance of Helen Barrington in 1963. The officers later recounted that his hand trembled slightly as he set down the coffee cup, but his gaze remained strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for over 40 years. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. March 1963, Winchester, Virginia, was a small town nestled in the Shenandoah Valley, where life moved slowly amid apple blossom-lined roads and rows of old wooden houses. The population consisted mostly of civil servants, teachers, and farmers, people who knew each other by full names and workplaces. In that peaceful atmosphere, Helen Barrington, 29 years old, was a familiar face. She worked as a credit officer at First National Bank of Winchester, rated as careful, punctual, and reserved. Helen's marriage to Robert Barrington, a truck salesman, had fallen apart a year earlier, and since then she lived with her 8-year-old daughter in a 1-story house on the southern edge of town. Helen kept a private lifestyle, devoting time to her job, her child, and the small garden behind the house, where she often planted lavender and wild roses. On Friday afternoon, March 22nd, a few neighbors saw Helen tidying up in the backyard, followed by a short conversation with Robert, who arrived in the black pickup truck that everyone in the neighborhood recognized. The conversation didn't last long. There was no shouting, just a fleeting tension before it ended when Robert left. Afterward, the lights in Helen's house stayed on late into the night. The next morning, the bank recorded her absence without notice. Colleagues tried calling her home, but got no answer. By noon, an employee went to the house, knocked multiple times, and was met with silence. The door was locked from the outside. Inside, the kitchen light was still on, the curtains undrawn. A sense of unease spread gradually. That same afternoon, Helen's mother, Grace Tilden, drove from the suburbs of Frederick to Winchester after hearing her daughter hadn't shown up for work. She searched around the house, called out her name, and asked the neighbors. No one had seen Helen leave the house the previous evening, nor heard any unusual noises. On the dining table, the dishes were still there. The teacup bore traces of dried tea, and the morning newspaper hadn't been brought in. Helen's gray Chevrolet Bel Air was missing from the garage. The landline phone rang unanswered. Grace called the hospital, the church, and even the police station to inquire, but there was no news. As night fell, she and a relative stayed at her daughter's house, checked every room again, then went next door to ask once more. Everything was empty, with no signs that Helen had left voluntarily or been robbed. By nightfall, after hours of fruitless waiting, the family decided to go to the Winchester police station to formally report Helen Barrington missing and request that police open an urgent search file. The night shift that day was handled by Sergeant James Holloway. He recorded the initial statement from Helen's mother, drafted the intake report, and immediately notified his superiors. Per regulations, cases of adults losing contact for over 12 hours without signs of travel or communication would be escalated to investigators. The next morning, the file was handed over to Police Chief Harold Denton, who had over 20 years of experience in the field. After reading the summary, Denton ordered the opening of an official file, assigned case number 1465-21, and organized an urgent meeting with 2 key investigators. He directed a full review of Helen's schedule in the 2 days prior to her disappearance, verification of personal relationships, especially between her and her ex-husband, Robert Barrington. That same morning, police went to Helen's home to document the scene. The front door was locked, the windows showed no signs of forced entry. Inside was tidy, with no disturbed belongings. The morning newspaper was still on the porch, the teapot in the kitchen held cold water, and her work outfit was hanging ready on a chair. The forensics team photographed the scene and cataloged potentially relevant items. Denton ordered the garage checked and noted the absence of the victim's Chevrolet Bel Air from the yard. Concurrently, he sent another team to First National Bank of Winchester, where Helen worked. The branch manager confirmed she was an exemplary employee with no complaints or internal disputes. The time clock showed Helen present through the end of March 22. A close colleague said she had mentioned staying home that weekend with her daughter. The girl was currently with her father, per a temporary agreement between the two. Denton noted, no personal reason for leaving town. After gathering information from the bank, police expanded verification to friends and neighbors. All described Helen as private, with habits of going to work and returning home on time, no long trips, no wide social circle. No one had ever heard her mention plans to move or go away for an extended period. These facts led to the early dismissal of the voluntary departure hypothesis. That afternoon, Denton summoned Robert Barrington for a statement. The record noted, he cooperated, answered calmly, confirmed meeting Helen that afternoon to discuss taking their daughter to school. When asked about the time he left her house, he said around after dinner, but couldn't specify the hour. He stated that afterward, he returned to his mother's house in northern Winchester and slept there. Denton noted the need to verify witnesses for this statement. Police also reviewed regional accident reports, contacted hospitals and motels within a 20-mile radius, with all results negative. No signs of traffic accidents or emergency admissions matching the disappearance timeline. By the end of the day, all data was compiled in a temporary report sent to the chief's office. The summary concluded, the victim left no information, took no luggage or cash, no signs of robbery, no preparatory behavior for departure. Based on these factors, Harold Denton signed the official decision to open the file. Helen Barrington, missing person investigation, and classified it as missing suspected criminal element. 3 days after the Winchester police opened the missing person investigation, Grace Tilden, Helen's mother, received a letter mailed from the city of Richmond, over 100 miles south of Winchester. The envelope was pale yellow, with no return address, only Helen Barrington and her home address. The stamp featured President Kennedy, postmarked March 25. Inside was a handwritten sheet, with right slanting script different from Helen's familiar handwriting. The content was brief, just a few lines. I'm at the military hospital in Richmond. I have severe flu, but I'm okay. I'll stay for treatment a few days. Don't worry about me. I love you and Emily. No hospital name, no address, no full signature. Grace felt uneasy the moment she read it. Helen had never used that type of paper, and the phrasing in the letter didn't match her habits. She brought the letter to the Winchester police station that same afternoon, requesting verification of its authenticity. Chief Harold Denton received the letter, drafted an evidence intake report, and forwarded it to the Criminal Forensics Unit. He ordered verification of its origin through the Postal Service. The envelope was mailed from Richmond Central Station, no sender information, the address written in blue ink with even bold strokes, indicating the use of a modern fountain pen, rare in Winchester at the time. While awaiting analysis results, Denton sent 2 investigators to contact 3 major hospitals in Richmond, including St. Mary Sep Memorial Hospital and a military facility near Fort Lee. All confirmed no patient named Helen Barrington had been admitted that week. No diagnostic records, no matching registration files. The report sent back to Winchester stated clearly, negative, no match found. Denton noted in the margin, high likelihood of forged letter. Simultaneously, the handwriting expert compared the letter's content with Helen's stored signatures and loan notes at the bank. The results showed clear differences. The H in Helen in the letter was slanted and angular, while her real signature was always straight and rounded. The letters R and T in Richmond were unusually elongated, punctuation misplaced, revealing the strokes of a different writer, not someone with habitual handwriting, the technical report concluded. No match, handwriting mismatch confirmed. Harold Denton held a brief meeting at the police headquarters to assess the situation. The investigators all agreed that the letter might have been sent to mislead the investigation and delay the search. Notably, the writer had some knowledge of Helen's life, knew her daughter's name, knew her mother lived in the Frederick suburbs, and knew how to write in an intimate tone, but with inaccurate personal details. Grace further confirmed, Helen had no acquaintances in Richmond, no relatives or friends living there. Denton ordered a review of any cases possibly linked to Richmond around the time of the disappearance, especially those who had contact with Helen in the 2 weeks prior. The gathered report showed only Robert Barrington, the ex-husband, had driven through Richmond when delivering to an auto dealership. Though this data wasn't enough to prove anything, Denton ordered it noted in the file as a factor to monitor. At the end of the meeting he concluded, "This letter is not from the victim. The purpose is to delay the attention of family and police. The behavior indicates intent to conceal, so the investigation must shift to the possibility of premeditated crime." The final note in the record of March 26, 1963, marked the first turning point in the Helen Barrington case, from an ordinary missing person case to a serious criminal investigation. Immediately after concluding that the letter from Richmond was forged, Police Chief Harold Denton ordered an expansion of the search scope. An emergency meeting was held at the Winchester Police Headquarters on the morning of March 27, 1963, attended by the entire investigative team, representatives from the Frederick County Civilian Patrol, and the local rescue squad. Tasks were clearly divided. Police were responsible for mapping the area, designating key zones around the victim's home and along routes leading out of town. The civilian patrol handled visual sweeps of dense, hard-to-access areas. Denton required all activities to be meticulously documented, with each searched area marked in red paint on the master map. Based on Winchester's terrain, the search area was defined within a 5-mile radius of the Barrington home, stretching from Apple Blossom Road down to the Opequon Riverbank in the south, including abandoned fields and the Millbrook Forest. Over 40 people were mobilized, divided into 8 small teams, equipped with walkie-talkies, flashlights, measuring tapes, and tracking dogs. The search began at dawn, while thick fog still blanketed the fields. On the first day, Sergeant Holloway's team swept along the dirt road connecting the residential area to the Opequon River, checking every ditch, bush, wooden bridge, and dump site. They found no personal items that could belong to Helen. Simultaneously, another team combed through Millbrook Forest, an area rarely visited. The only record was a few old tire tracks mixed in the damp soil, but the timing could not be determined. The end-of-day report noted, no signs of struggle or voluntary departure. In the residential area around the Barrington home, police knocked on every door to collect statements. Most residents said the night had been quiet, with no unusual lights or sounds. However, one witness living 2 houses from Helen, Martha Cole, recounted hearing a loud thud around after 10 p.m., like a metal door slamming against something hard, followed by the sound of an engine starting and then going silent. She thought it was just a neighbor testing their vehicle and paid no attention. This statement was recorded and cross-referenced with reports from other households. No one heard screams, arguments, or any signs of conflict. Denton noted that the engine starting detail aligned with the possible time of Helen's disappearance, but was insufficient to confirm criminal involvement. Over the next 2 days, the search radius expanded 3 miles westward, including the old Watkins Farm outskirts and routes leading to Valley Pike. Search teams used small boats to scan along the Opequon River bank for tire tracks or discarded items. The shallow, slow-moving water allowed thorough inspection, but results yielded nothing beyond a few rusted metal objects of unknown origin. To the north, police checked the Winchester freight yard, where Robert Barrington often delivered vehicles. No witnesses had seen Helen there in the days leading up to her disappearance. Motels, diners, and gas stations in the area were questioned, but no one recalled a woman matching the description. By the weekend, Denton compiled all field reports, assembling a detailed map showing the searched areas. Over 70% of the priority zone had been marked as checked. The report concluded, no signs of struggle, no evidence of voluntary departure, and no direct leads on Helen's whereabouts. The chief noted in the file, initial search completed, no significant findings. Despite the thorough search, the initial results only brought heavy silence. No evidence, no new witnesses, and Winchester remained steeped in tense anticipation, where a woman had vanished without a trace in the heart of what seemed a peaceful town. On the fourth day of the search, as teams had nearly swept the entire southern outskirts of Winchester, new information was relayed from Sergeant Holloway. Around noon, while checking the parking lot behind Winchester Memorial Hospital, a civilian patrol volunteer discovered a silver-gray car parked in the far corner, near the metal fence separating the medical waste storage area. The license plate matched the registration of Helen Barrington's Chevrolet Bel Air. The car showed no signs of being moved in several days. A thin layer of dust covered it evenly. The tires had no fresh tracks, and the ground beneath the undercarriage was dry and clean, indicating it had been left before the rain 2 nights prior. Immediately upon receiving the report, Chief Harold Denton and the forensics team arrived at the scene. The parking area was cordoned off with tape, and hospital security was instructed to halt all vehicle movement. The initial report noted the car was locked, doors showed no pry marks, windows were intact, no scratches or collision damage, no key in the ignition, door handles clean, no clear fingerprints. Denton ordered panoramic and detailed photographs using Kodak Tri-X film and recorded the parking position on the hospital map. A security guard stated the car had likely been there at least 3 days. He remembered seeing it in the same spot during his shift on March 24th, assuming it belonged to medical staff. Interior inspection was conducted carefully. The driver's door was opened using a spare key provided by Helen's mother. The front cabin was clean, with no signs of struggle. On the passenger seat was a small handbag containing a wallet, identification papers, bank employee card, an unopened pack of cigarettes, and a small notebook. In the trunk, police found a beige wool coat and a pair of high-heeled shoes, both dry and free of mud. No suitcase or luggage. All items were sealed and cataloged in order. The forensics team collected fingerprint samples from the steering wheel and door handles. Preliminary reports showed multiple overlapping prints, most matching Helen's stored samples, with some unidentified. No blood or signs of cleaning inside the vehicle. The fuel gauge read near empty, consistent with local driving. The hospital map showed the parking spot near the rear exit, a low-traffic area with no security cameras, as the hospital had no surveillance system at the time. Denton questioned if Helen had driven here, why park in a secluded spot, inform no one, and never return. The hypothesis of intentional abandonment was raised. The investigation team continued interviewing hospital staff, delivery drivers, and nearby residents. No one recalled seeing a woman matching Helen's description in the past 3 days. A night shift nurse mentioned seeing vehicle headlights flicker on and off on the night of March 23rd, but could not identify the car. The report noted possible correlation, unconfirmed. After processing the scene, the vehicle was towed to the police impound for detailed analysis. Under the chassis, no mud characteristic of the Millbrook Forest area, confirming the car had not traveled far from residential zones. The engine was in normal condition, battery charged, no mechanical issues. The right rear window was cracked open about ½ an inch, possibly by someone inside before exiting. Police tested the radio, it worked, and they found a folded copy of the Winchester Star newspaper on the rear floor, dated March 22nd, the day Helen was last seen. Harold Denton compiled the data in the March 28th report. Vehicle recovered intact, locked, no visible damage. Contents consistent with routine personal belongings. No sign of robbery or struggle. Placement suggests intentional abandonment. This conclusion was added to the case file as evidence supporting the theory that the car was not stolen, but staged to mislead. The appearance of the Chevrolet Bel Air in the hospital parking lot confirmed a clear anomaly in Helen Barrington's disappearance, opening a new investigative phase with many unanswered questions. After the Chevrolet Bel Air was discovered in the Winchester Memorial Hospital parking lot, Chief Harold Denton directed a re-examination of the primary scene, Helen Barrington's home. He reasoned that if the car was abandoned intentionally, the house might hold more significant clues. On the morning of March 29, 1963, a three-person forensics team was dispatched, equipped with cameras, floodlights, Kastle-Meyer reagent for blood detection, and standard evidence collection kits. The inspection was conducted in the presence of Helen's mother, Grace Tilden. The house door remained locked as during the initial police visit, with no pry marks. Each room was unlocked and fully photographed per protocol. The living room was tidy, with a few magazines on the coffee table, no disturbed items. In the dining room, plates and teacup remained in place, as when Grace first discovered them. Everything appeared ordinarily neat, but Denton ordered focused inspection of the garage floor to clarify the absence of Helen's car since the night of disappearance. When the garage door was opened, a strong cleaning chemical odor wafted out. The concrete floor was damp, with multiple shiny streaks, as if recently scrubbed. In the corner near the tool shelf, a crumpled white linen handkerchief bore faint red stains. On the edge was embroidered RB in dark blue thread. This matched Robert Barrington's initials. Harold Denton signaled to halt all movement, called the scene photographer to document the evidence from multiple angles. The handkerchief was lifted with metal tongs, placed in a sealed nylon bag, labeled 6A. The floor was swept for additional traces. The shiny streaks on the concrete were sampled separately with sterile swabs. When Kastle-Meyer reagent was applied, the samples turned pink, confirming human blood. Denton noted in his log, blood traces confirmed human origin. One investigator, Sergeant Holloway, noticed a fallen picture frame at the base of the wall near the kitchen pass-through. The glass was shattered, the wooden corner chipped, the photo inside showing Helen and her daughter at last year's Christmas. Small glass shards were scattered on the floor, mixed with a few dark fabric fibers. These fragments were collected and sealed separately. Under ultraviolet light, the forensics team detected additional faint streaks near the wall base, extending about 2 feet, stopping at the garage door. The streaks were faint, as if wiped, but with residual edges. The scene report noted possible collision or heavy object dragging. In Helen's bedroom, everything appeared normal. Bed neatly made, alarm clock stopped at 11:20, closet fully stocked with clothing. However, an investigator noticed a small scratch on the closet's wooden frame, as if scraped by metal. No valuables missing, wallet and personal jewelry intact. This ruled out theft. At the back door leading to the garden, police found the lock freshly polished clean. In the lower door jamb was a long light brown hair, similar to Helen's color. The hair was sampled for analysis. Outside, the soil near the garage entrance path showed large shoe prints, at least 2 sizes larger than Helen's. The impressions were unclear, but indicated a deep, narrow sole, possibly men's shoes. Denton ordered photographs, scale measurements, and plaster casts for storage. In the preliminary compilation, the scene report listed 5 anomalies: blood on the garage floor, handkerchief embroidered, RB, broken picture frame, drag marks of a heavy object, and unidentified male shoe prints. These details reinforced the likelihood of a confrontation inside the home before Helen's disappearance. Harold Denton signed the report, ordering all samples sent to the Virginia State Crime Lab in Richmond for detailed analysis. Before leaving the house, he paused at the garage door, jotting a short note in his notebook, possible site of confrontation. In the end-of-day report, Denton concluded, scene indicates concealed violence. Blood traces human, not animal. Analysis needed to determine origin. Initial basis to conclude Helen Barrington's disappearance linked to an assault occurring within her own home. The forensic results from the scene, involving the blood stains and the handkerchief embroidered with RB, prompted Police Chief Harold Denton to summon Robert Barrington to headquarters for a formal interrogation. The session was scheduled for the morning of March 30, 1963, in the second-floor interview room of the Winchester Police Department. Robert arrived on time, wearing a white dress shirt and dark khaki pants, without an attorney present. He appeared cooperative, shaking hands with the officers, but his eyes shifted when asked to recount the details of the last evening he saw Helen. Denton began with basic questions: the time he arrived at the house, the reason, and the time he left. Robert stated that he arrived early in the evening, bringing cold medicine for Helen, because their daughter had mentioned she was ill. According to him, the two only spoke briefly in the backyard, mainly about scheduling child pickups. He insisted he did not enter the house, did not have dinner with her, and left right after dark. When Denton pressed for specifics on the timing, Robert vaguely replied, probably a little after 8, but could not provide a witness to confirm he went straight home afterward. He said he stayed overnight at his mother's house in northern Winchester, but when police contacted her, Mrs. Barrington stated her son returned very late, possibly after 11. The time discrepancy was clearly noted in the record. Denton asked Robert to explain the handkerchief embroidered with his initials found in Helen's garage. Robert paused for a few seconds before saying it was an old gift Helen had kept from before their separation. He denied entering the garage or having any altercation on the night she disappeared. When questioned about the blood on the floor, Robert replied that Helen had once spilled paint and suggested the police were mistaken. Sergeant Holloway noted his reaction, calm voice, but eyes avoiding direct contact. Throughout the morning, Denton maintained an even tone, avoiding pressure, focusing on aligning Robert's statements with the collected evidence. When cross-referencing with neighbor Martha Cole's account, who heard a thud and an engine starting that night, Robert denied it, saying his truck never left after 8. However, vehicle maintenance records obtained by police showed his Ford truck's odometer had increased by 8 miles since the last recorded reading, despite his claim of not driving far that week. When asked, Robert explained it might have been accidentally idling the engine. Denton made no comment, only requesting the detail be clearly recorded. In the section on personal relationships, Robert described the separation as amicable, stating he and Helen still kept in touch to co-parent their daughter. However, according to Helen's friends, the two had argued over finances and custody just 2 weeks before her disappearance. Denton presented this information and asked for a response. Robert affirmed it had been resolved with no ongoing conflict. Police continued questioning about daily habits, workplace, and movements in the 3 days after Helen's disappearance. Robert answered smoothly, but many timelines did not match those of involved parties. As the interrogation extended into the afternoon, Denton paused to review the record. He noted that most of Robert's answers did not directly contradict evidence, but lacked necessary precision and showed a tendency to evade. Blood and shoe print analysis from the garage was still pending, so no physical link to the scene could be established. Denton considered current suspicions limited to person of interest, someone to monitor. Before concluding, he reiterated, "We're just trying to clarify Miss Barrington's disappearance. If you have anything to add, contact us immediately." Robert nodded, signed the record, and left. After he departed, Denton briefly conferred with Holloway. "We have a suspect, but no charge." The internal report that day noted, Robert Barrington's statements contradict witness accounts and travel timelines. No direct physical evidence or body, cannot prosecute. Recommend continued surveillance of subject and await forensic results. The interrogation ended in a tense atmosphere, but without answers to the most critical question: what happened to Helen Barrington on the night she vanished? After the interrogation of Robert Barrington yielded no concrete results, Chief Harold Denton decided to return to fieldwork, expanding the search beyond the residential area. The compiled report showed that, aside from the vicinity of the victim's home, thorough sweeps had not been conducted in southwestern Winchester, where the terrain included sparse forests and abandoned wells in the old Millbrook area. This was a site once used by the U.S. military during World War II for rescue training and field well digging, left abandoned post-war with dozens of deep pits scattered across the valley. On the morning of April 1, 1963, the Winchester Police Force, in coordination with the Frederick Civilian Patrol, deployed a new search plan. The Millbrook map was remarked, identifying a total of 12 old wells within a 2-mile radius, most without covers or overgrown with weeds. The search team consisted of 15 people, divided into 3 groups, equipped with lighting, anchor ropes, iron hooks, and 2 tracking dogs. The weather that day was cold, with thick fog limiting visibility. The first group headed south along the dirt road to the abandoned Palmer farm, where 3 wells were clustered. Shining lights down revealed pale water reflections with no foreign objects. These wells were marked as checked and noted no finding. To the north, the second group, led by Sergeant Holloway, surveyed deeper wells labeled Well #5 and Well #6. They lowered lights to measure depth, recording about 25 feet, with still water and no floating objects. However, nearby, the group discovered a larger well, locally called Well #7, nearly 2 meters in diameter, its mouth partially covered by dry branches and rusted iron mesh. At the bottom, flashlight beams reflected off thick, black water. Part of the well wall had collapsed, the soil around the rim slippery, making direct access dangerous. Holloway marked the location on the map and recommended bringing a winch and specialized safety ropes for a thorough check the next day. But sudden bad weather hit, with drizzle and strong winds forcing a delay. Denton ordered the entire team to withdraw to avoid accidents, noting, Well #7 remains unchecked. Revisit when conditions permit. While waiting, the third group continued sweeping along the Opequon River. Mud, fabric scraps and wood samples were collected, but later tests showed no relation to Helen Barrington. Despite the search teams working continuously for 3 days, no new evidence was found. Police also recanvassed hospital reports in surrounding neighborhoods for anyone who saw a woman matching the description, light brown hair, 5'5" tall, wearing a beige coat, but all leads dead-ended. A truck driver reported seeing a Chevrolet Bel Air, like Helen's, parked near the hospital on the evening of March 23, but he could not confirm the driver. This detail only reinforced the theory that the car was abandoned around the time of her disappearance, but revealed nothing about where she went. Denton clearly sensed the growing stalemate in the investigation. The summary report of April 5 stated, search radius expanded through Millbrook, Opequon River, Palmer Farm, no signs of struggle or related evidence. Well #7 identified as potential area, requires further inspection. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating in Winchester. Some said Helen ran off with someone else, others insisted she was murdered. Police remained silent, withholding details about the blood and handkerchief to avoid compromising the investigation. However, internally, the department began to divide. Some investigators believed Helen was killed and her body disposed of in the forest. Others thought she might have left voluntarily after a dispute with Robert. Denton maintained neutrality, noting in his log, no evidence for any hypothesis, only an unsolved disappearance. When the weather cleared, the technical team returned to Millbrook to resume surveying, but water levels in the wells had risen due to rain, making inspection nearly impossible. Well #7, the only unchecked site, remained on the pending inspection list. Ultimately, after over a week of fruitless searching, the operation was suspended. The Winchester police recalled their forces, leaving only a small team to follow any new leads. In the final report sent to the state of Virginia, Harold Denton wrote briefly, extensive ground search conducted over 12 square miles. No evidence recovered, no signs of voluntary departure or confirmed foul play. Investigation continues under missing person classification. From then on, the Helen Barrington disappearance entered its first period of silence, where all search efforts halted before a cold, deep pit no one had yet reached. Well #7, the darkness no one dared to look into. 2 years after Helen Barrington vanished, Winchester gradually returned to its peaceful rhythm, as if no case had ever occurred. But in the police department's file storage, the dossier labeled Case #146521 remained, thick, bound with cloth ties, marked pending review. Throughout 1963 and 1964, the investigative team uncovered no new evidence. The blood sample from the garage had been tested 3 times, confirming only human blood type O, matching millions in the U.S., inconclusive as to identity. The embroidered RB handkerchief remained the only valuable evidence, but the embroidery itself, according to Robert Barrington, was just a coincidence, as his mother had given him many similar ones. Chief Harold Denton, though convinced Helen had met foul play, could find no legal grounds to prosecute. He had requested assistance from the Virginia State Bureau of Investigation, but they concluded insufficient basis to open a criminal file. In June 1965, Denton signed the decision to shift the case from active investigation to missing, unknown cause, a symbolic acknowledgement of deadlock. Local media reported briefly, just a few lines on page 3 of the Winchester Star, investigation into the disappearance of resident Helen Barrington, 29, closed after 2 years without progress. Police will reopen if new evidence emerges. From then on, her name gradually faded from town conversations. Helen's family stayed in Winchester briefly before moving to Charlottesville with relatives. The young daughter was sent to live with an aunt. Robert Barrington left earlier in the fall of 1965. He sold all his assets, drove his truck out of Winchester, stating he wanted to start a new life in the Southwest. Residency records showed he later settled in Alamogordo, New Mexico, working at a truck repair shop. No one in Helen's family maintained contact with him. In the final report before archiving the file, Denton wrote succinctly, "No body, no confession, no evidence, only silence." Case hash 146521 was transferred to the Frederick County Storage Vault, placed in slot 47, the section for unresolved missing persons. On the file cover, a cold-typed line, status, unresolved, missing person. Last update, June 12, 1965. From then on, the Helen Barrington case was buried among hundreds of unsolved files, becoming a faint name in Winchester's history, a woman who vanished without a trace, leaving behind a silent house, an abandoned car, and a question no one wanted to ask anymore. 40 years passed since case hash 146521 was sealed, the yellowed documents still lying untouched in the Frederick County Evidence Vault, Helen Barrington's name forgotten by all. But in 2005, the state of Virginia launched a large-scale program called the Cold Case DNA Initiative, aimed at re-examining and analyzing biological evidence from unsolved cases of the previous century. The project was carried out by the Virginia Department of Public Safety in collaboration with forensic laboratories in Richmond and Roanoke. Their goal was to leverage new DNA technology, something unavailable to criminal investigations in the 1960s, to see if seemingly meaningless evidence could reveal anything. Among the counties screened, Winchester and Frederick were a small portion, but received special attention due to many old files retaining evidence in good condition. The lead investigator for the Winchester Review was Inspector Anna Denton of the Virginia Bureau of Investigation. At 34 years old, she was the granddaughter of the late police chief Harold Denton, who had led the Helen Barrington case in 1963. Upon receiving the list of files to review, Anna paused at the familiar line, case hash 146521. Missing person Helen Barrington, 1963. The name Denton in the old file was underlined in blue ink, her grandfather's signature. She read it over and over, feeling an invisible thread connecting 2 generations. In July 2005, she and 2 state technicians visited the Frederick County Storage Vault to assess the condition of the old files. In the cold concrete room, hundreds of paper boxes were stacked, each labeled by year. Opening box 47, they found the Barrington files still tied with cloth string, accompanied by 2 sealed evidence envelopes. The faded typed label read, "Blood samples, garage floor." Anna checked the red wax seals, intact and unopened since 1965. With her investigative experience, she understood the value. Most old cases had lost biological samples due to storage conditions, but here, the entire blood evidence remained. A rarity. She immediately drafted a report, took photographs and requested the samples be transferred to the Virginia State DNA Lab in Richmond for feasibility analysis. The preliminary forensic report indicated that despite being dry for over 4 decades, the blood sample retained enough organic structure for DNA extraction via PCR amplification. Anna submitted a formal request to the Cold Case Program Director. Reanalysis request for case hash 146521. Probable human blood, intact sample, potential for DNA profiling. While awaiting approval, she reread the entire original case file. The Underwood-type reports from her grandfather detailed the Chevrolet Bel Air abandoned in the hospital parking lot. Blood in the garage, the RB embroidered handkerchief, the unchecked well hash 7 due to danger. Each line made her envision her young grandfather, determined yet powerless against the era's limitations. In her personal notebook, Anna wrote biological evidence plus blood sample = only chance. By late August, Anna's request was approved, paving the way for a pivotal turning point in the file forgotten for 4 decades. Case hash 146521 was transferred from the Frederick County Vault to the Central Lab in Richmond with intact seals. With official authorization, the forensic team began preparing for DNA decoding, the first breath of the revived investigation. As the Virginia State DNA Lab in Richmond began analyzing the samples, Inspector Anna Denton was present to oversee every step. The swab containing the dried blood was removed from the sealed envelope under sterile white light, ready for extraction via PCR. The advanced amplification method that could replicate millions of copies from just a few remaining cells. The process was slow, each amplification cycle taking hours, monitored by specialized software. After over a week, a complete DNA sequence was extracted, clearly showing the genetic profile of a male individual. Technicians compared it to Helen Barrington's DNA, obtained from personal items stored in the file, including a hairbrush and toothbrush collected in 1963. Results ruled out the blood belonging to Helen. The genetic sequence was entirely different, confirming the garage floor blood was not the victim's. This immediately shifted the case in a new direction. The lab sent a preliminary report to Anna, noting male DNA profile, likely unrelated to victim's strong sample integrity, suitable for CODIS entry. The sample was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database managed by the FBI, storing genetic information from millions of arrested or convicted individuals. The system took 3 days to match, and on the morning of September 17, 2005, an automatic notification was sent to the Virginia Bureau of Investigation headquarters. Match found, category convicted offender. Subject Robert L. Barrington. Location, Alamogordo, New Mexico. Anna read the report with her heart pounding. The DNA on the RB embroidered handkerchief and garage floor matched perfectly with Robert Barrington's genetic profile. The victim's ex-husband, who had left Winchester in 1965. CODIS records showed his DNA was in the system due to a minor assault in Alamogordo in 1992, when Robert received a 3-year suspended sentence for attacking a coworker while intoxicated. The sample collected then was entered into New Mexico's database and synced to national CODIS. The current match had over 99.98% accuracy. The Richmond lab immediately sent a confirmation report to the VBI director, including documentation proving the entire chain of custody from 1963 to present was valid, with no procedural violations. In the validation file, the forensic expert wrote clearly, chain of custody verified, all seals intact, original catalog numbers consistent with Winchester PD evidence log, no contamination or transfer detected. Sample authenticity confirmed. With this confirmation, the 1963 biological evidence officially held legal value, sufficient to reopen the case as a suspected homicide. Anna printed copies of the results and brought them to the VBI command room in Richmond to present to the investigative director. An emergency meeting was convened with representatives from the state prosecutor's office and Winchester police. Old data was projected on screen, photos of the house, hospital parking lot, Millbrook wells, and finally the 1963 image of the RB handkerchief. Everything my grandfather suspected now has an answer, Anna said in her presentation. The blood on the floor isn't Helen's, it's from the man who claimed he never stepped into the garage. The statement silenced the room. Prosecutors considered charging first-degree murder based on DNA evidence, but without a body, they agreed to first reopen as a homicide investigation. Suspected foul play. Winchester was officially back on Virginia's investigative map after over 4 decades. Immediately after the meeting, a special task force was formed, led by Inspector Anna Denton, in coordination with current Winchester Police Chief Carl Jennings. Their first task: recanvass all witnesses, documents, and locations tied to the 1963 case, while contacting New Mexico authorities to verify Robert Barrington's residence, now 73 years old. In a memo to the team, Anna wrote, "The Helen Barrington case is no longer a missing person file. We have blood, identity, and an intact chain of evidence. This is the moment to give the victim a voice after over 40 years of silence." By late September, case #146521 was officially reopened, marked with a red stamp, Reinvestigation. 2005 on the cover. Harold Denton's old documents were digitized, originals placed in a special evidence cabinet. The VBI internal bulletin noted briefly, "Cold Case Virginia, reopening Winchester missing person 1963. DNA evidence links, suspect Robert L. Barrington. Investigation resumed." After over 40 years, the Helen Barrington case was awakened, not by witnesses or confession, but by a few drops of dried blood under the light of DNA technology, something Harold Denton's era could only dream of. After the Helen Barrington case was officially restarted, Inspector Anna Denton spent the first weeks reviewing the entire 1963 witness list from the original file. Most who lived near the Barrington home then were now deceased or relocated, but some names had updated addresses in the Virginia resident database. She divided the list into 3 groups: direct witnesses, indirect witnesses, and investigative support. Among them, one name stood out: Earl Whitman, a former volunteer firefighter with Winchester Fire and Rescue in 1963, mentioned in a faded note by her grandfather. Whitman, on scene Millbrook, night patrol saw vehicle near the creek. There was no formal statement from him in the file, just an open question. Anna decided to track him down. Administrative records showed Earl Whitman, now 82, living in Front Royal, about 25 miles from Winchester. On October 14, 2005, she drove to the address, a small red brick house along Skyline Drive. Whitman, with snow-white hair, still sharp-minded, received her in his modest kitchen. Upon hearing Anna introduce herself as Harold Denton's granddaughter reinvestigating Helen Barrington, his eyes lit up. "I thought no one remembered that anymore," he said, then fell silent for a long moment. After Anna explained the new DNA results, he nodded slowly. "I remember that night clearly," he began. "I was on duty with 2 others at Fire Station 2. Around 11, we got a call about smoke in Millbrook, thought it was trash burning. I drove to check, but there was no fire, just a black pickup, parked on the dirt road, leading to the old wells. Headlights off, only cabin light on. I saw a man's silhouette at the well's edge, looked like he was pulling something down. When I turned on my spotlight, he quickly turned away, got in the truck, and drove off." Anna recorded the entire conversation, asking for more details: vehicle type, man's build, exact location. He described a black Ford F-100, 2-door, long bed, matching Robert Barrington's truck. The well, he said, was about 200 yards off the main road, with a big oak growing diagonally across the mouth. Locals called it Well-7. Anna felt her chest tighten. That name, Well-7, was the site her grandfather noted as unchecked due to dangerous terrain. 40 years earlier, it was skipped due to heavy rain and landslides. After the meeting, Anna returned to Winchester and searched the 1963 topographic maps in the Frederick County vault. Hand-drawn in black ink on tracing paper, they marked each well in Millbrook. The #7 label was at the map's edge, near a dry creek, matching Whitman's description. She photographed it and compared with current satellite imagery. The area was now fully overgrown, but coordinates could still be approximated. Anna forwarded the information to the VBI field survey team and requested on-site verification. On October 21st, the survey team used GPS to locate the corresponding well #7 position. After 2 hours trekking through forest and muddy terrain, they found a 2-meter-wide pit, mouth covered in dry leaves and rotten branches, but the old stone and brick structure remained. On the rim, a fallen old oak lay diagonally, exactly as Whitman described. Clear signs confirmed this was the well #7 from the old file. When the technical team used ultrasonic equipment, they recorded water level nearly 4 meters below the rim, with the bottom reflecting multiple objects, possibly metal or wood. The preliminary report stated, "Site confirmed. Structural integrity unstable. Recommend controlled excavation and partial water removal prior to descent." Anna read the report and decided to seek court approval for excavation, per regulations. Reopening an old scene in a natural heritage area required official prosecutor orders and Department of Resources permits. On October 24th, she presented the full file and maps to the Frederick prosecutor's office, including Earl Whitman's statement and the Robert Barrington DNA match. The minutes concluded, reasonable grounds to believe well-labeled #7 is directly related to the 1963 disappearance. Request excavation warrant. That afternoon, the warrant was signed and sent to VBI. Anna carefully placed a copy in her grandfather's original file. In her work log, she wrote one short line, well #7, never opened. 42 years later, we will look down. The excavation was scheduled for early November, when weather stabilized and well water levels dropped. Winchester, the town that had forgotten the disappearance, was about to witness another search, this time not just based on memory, but on evidence awakened from the very ground of the past. On the morning of November 2, 2005, the quiet Millbrook Forest was completely cordoned off. Warning signs reading "No Entry, Virginia State Investigation Scene" were posted around the old well labeled well #7, a site untouched for over 4 decades. Inspector Anna Denton arrived early, accompanied by the state forensics team and field technicians. The air was cold and damp, with mist shrouding the dry leaves, creating a scene both silent and somber. Modern equipment was deployed for the first time at a location that, in the 1960s, had only shovels and flashlights. Before excavation began, the forensics team used ground-penetrating radar to survey the subsurface structure. The device emitted scans in strips around the well's mouth, with data displayed on a portable screen showing an uneven well bottom. At a depth of about 4.3 meters, 3 strong reflection zones appeared, 2 small circular ones, and 1 larger rectangular, likely metallic objects. The field report noted, subsurface anomaly detected, rectangular metallic object, approximately 1.2 x 0.6 meters. This finding prompted Anna to immediately order a halt to water pumping to preserve the scene and prepare specialized lifting equipment. The well's water level was gradually lowered overnight, dropping to just over 1 meter by the next morning. When light clearly illuminated the bottom, the technical team saw thick mud mixed with rock fragments and rotten branches. In one corner, metal glinted. They began carefully using hooks and ropes. After over an hour, the object was lifted from the well, a rectangular iron box, heavily rusted, with an old-style latch lock. When the surface was wiped clean, they noticed a temporary metal label stuck on the side, engraved Winchester Hardware Company, a local store that operated in the 1950s. Anna ordered temporary sealing and on-site opening under the forensics team's camera lens. When the lid popped open, damp air from inside released a smell of soil and metal. Inside was faded floral fabric, rotted, wrapped around human bone segments. The skull and ribs were relatively intact, with the left front tooth chipped. On the right hand of the skeleton was still a gold wedding ring engraved with faint but readable letters, R&H 1955. Immediately, the scene was further cordoned off. The entire iron box was transferred to a specialized container, labeled Evidence Box 7A, and sent to the Richmond Forensic Lab. The on-site preliminary report stated clearly, skeletal remains consistent with adult female, approximately 25-35 years old at time of death. Estimated PMI, 40 years. Items in the box besides the floral fabric and ring included 2 mother-of-pearl buttons and a metal button engraved First National Bank, where Helen had worked. All were photographed, sealed, and recorded. Anna stood silently by the well's mouth. Once just a small note in her grandfather's notebook. Wind blew through the old oaks, carrying the murmur of underground water like an echo from the past. She recalled Helen Barrington's photo in the file, gentle face, wavy light brown hair, bright eyes. Now, all that remained was a few bone fragments. That afternoon, the forensics team completed excavating the surrounding area. Within a 3-meter radius of the well, they found a rusted shovel with a rotted wooden handle. The blade faintly engraved, Craftsman USA, common in the 1950s, 1960s. The handle had traces of black paint, possibly matching the color of Robert Barrington's Ford F-100 truck. All evidence was transported to Richmond overnight for detailed analysis. On November 5th, preliminary forensic results were sent to the investigative team. DNA extracted from bone marrow matched perfectly with Helen Barrington's stored personal DNA sample from a 1963 toothbrush. The report concluded, positive identification. Remains correspond to missing person Helen Barrington, deceased approximately 42 years prior. Additionally, isotope analysis showed decomposition traces consistent with long-term submersion, with no signs of post-burial movement. Small cracks on the ribs and jaw were consistent with blunt force impact, possibly assaulted before the body was placed in the well. The wedding ring engraved R&H 1955 was considered unmistakable personal evidence, as Frederick County marriage records confirmed 1955 as the year Helen and Robert Barrington registered their marriage. Upon receiving official notification, Anna stood silently for a long moment in her office. On the desk, 2 photos were placed side by side, one a black and white of Helen Barrington before disappearance. The other, the freshly cleaned ring from the lab. The match between the faint engraved letters and the file names made her feel her grandfather's case finally had resolution. The Virginia Bureau of Investigation's compiled report, sent to the Frederick County prosecutor on November 6, 2005, stated clearly, forensic excavation at Millbrook recovered skeletal remains confirmed as Helen Barrington, missing since 1963. Cause of death, undetermined, pending full autopsy. All evidence indicates deliberate concealment of body within metallic container. Case officially reclassified from missing persons to homicide investigation. After 42 years, Winchester had its first answer to the question that once haunted the town. Helen Barrington did not vanish. She was hidden in the depths of an old well, with scraps of fabric and a ring engraved with the name of the man who was once her husband. Immediately after the forensic report confirmed the body in the iron box at well #7 was Helen Barrington, Inspector Anna Denton and the Frederick County prosecutor began the legal process to charge the suspect. On November 8, 2005, the matching DNA file and physical evidence were submitted to the Virginia Attorney General's office with a request to issue a federal arrest warrant for Robert L. Barrington, 73 years old, residing in New Mexico. Based on the grounds, matching blood DNA traces, evidence related to vehicles and tools at the scene, and confirmation of the victim's intentionally buried body, the Frederick County Court issued a nationwide warrant for homicide, first-degree murder. Subsequently, the FBI office in Richmond coordinated with the federal branch in Albuquerque to receive the information. New Mexico residency records showed Robert living in a mobile home on the outskirts of the city near Central Avenue SE, where he worked part-time as a mechanic at a small auto shop. Tax records, driver's license, and medical files confirmed he was still healthy, single, living alone with an old hunting dog. On November 12, a joint investigative team of 4 FBI agents and 2 Virginia State Police flew to Albuquerque to execute the arrest. Anna Denton was present, carrying all original case documents, including DNA result copies, scene photos, and the extradition order. "This isn't just a case," she told the federal team in a brief pre-deployment meeting. "It's the final piece of a promise my grandfather couldn't fulfill." At 6 a.m. on November 13, 2005, agents surrounded the mobile home where Robert Barrington resided. He had just opened the door after hearing a knock, still in pajamas and visibly surprised to see federal police. "Mr. Robert Barrington," the lead agent read aloud, "you are under arrest pursuant to a warrant from Frederick County Court, Virginia, for first-degree murder in connection with the 1963 Helen Barrington case." Robert was silent for a few seconds, his eyes cloudy, then simply said, "You've got the wrong man. That ended long ago." He did not resist as he was handcuffed, but his cold expression made Anna, standing behind the police line, shudder. Inside the home, the search team seized some papers, a few mechanical tools, and a small wooden box containing old photos, including one of Robert and Helen at their 1955 wedding, matching the engraving on the ring found in the iron box. Robert was taken to the FBI Albuquerque headquarters for identification procedures and a controlled DNA sample. The sample was urgently transmitted electronically to the Virginia State Lab. Within 24 hours, results confirmed a perfect match with the 1963 scene DNA, with an error margin under 0.01%. The forensic report stated, "Sample identity confirmed, same genetic profile as blood recovered from Barrington residence, 1963. On November 15, the Virginia Bureau of Investigation officially announced, suspect Robert L. Barrington arrested in New Mexico. Virginia authorities will conduct extradition proceedings within 72 hours. Local media began republishing old 1960s clippings, headlined "Helen Barrington Disappearance, Finally Answered." During the escort back to Virginia, Anna accompanied the agent convoy. The flight from Albuquerque to Dulles lasted over 4 hours, but for her, it was the longest time of her life. Robert sat silently in the back row, lightly cuffed, staring out the window. As the plane prepared to land, he suddenly turned to her, voice hoarse. "Your grandfather, Harold Denton, still chasing me even now?" Anna did not respond. She only looked at him, thinking of this man 40 years earlier, younger, stronger, standing by a black truck on the edge of Millbrook Forest. When the plane landed at Dulles in the late afternoon, Robert Barrington was immediately transferred to the Virginia Bureau of Investigation's temporary detention center in Winchester. The nearly half-century journey from the rainy night of 1963 to the arrest in 2005 closed where it began. In the final report of the apprehension phase, the FBI noted, "Suspect located and apprehended without resistance. Evidence chain complete, ready for transfer to state jurisdiction for formal interrogation." Anna signed at the end of the record, her firm handwriting, "Robert Barrington returned to Virginia custody, investigation continues." Outside Winchester was in autumn, golden leaves covering the old streets. The town was quiet, as if listening to the echo of justice returning, delayed by over 40 years, but finally facing the one who needed to confront it. The formal interrogation of Robert L. Barrington was conducted on the morning of November 17, 2005, at the Virginia Bureau of Investigation headquarters in Winchester, the very place his father had been questioned 42 years earlier. Inspector Anna Denton, along with 2 senior investigators, Carl Jennings and Sergeant Matthew Hale, were directly responsible. The interrogation was fully audio and video recorded, in compliance with federal regulations. The small interview room had cold white lighting, with only a water bottle, a thick file folder, and a black and white photo of Helen Barrington from 1963 on the table. Robert had his handcuffs removed, but remained under constant supervision. At 73, he was thin, with gray hair, deeply wrinkled face. But his eyes still held a mix of pride and coldness. Anna began calmly, not accusing immediately, but recapping the investigation. the excavation of well #7, the discovery of the iron box, matching DNA samples, witness Earl Whitman's statement. She placed the photo of the wedding ring engraved R&H 1955, the final trace of a marriage turned to ashes, in front of Robert. "Mr. Barrington," she said slowly. "All this evidence points to one person, you. The blood in the garage, the DNA in the New Mexico file, and the body found in Millbrook. We need to hear what you've never said in over 40 years. Robert looked at the photo for a moment, then gave a faint smile. "Those things don't say anything. A person can bleed in their own home for 100 reasons." Jennings leaned forward. "But no one bleeds in the garage, and hours later, their wife vanishes without a trace." The first 3 hours passed in silence and denial. Robert stuck to his old statement. That evening he only visited Helen to bring cold medicine, then left at 8. He denied entering the garage, denied any conflict. But when Anna played the video of witness Whitman, who recounted seeing the black F-100 truck near the abandoned well on the night of March 22, 1963, his face briefly changed. "She didn't let it pass. You said that truck never left the house, but it was seen 3 miles away, at Millbrook, the exact night Helen disappeared." Robert fell silent, hands clasped. Anna opened the envelope with the forensic report, placing the DNA comparison chart in front of him. 2 perfectly matching bands. "This is the blood sample from your garage in 1963, and this is your DNA. The lab confirms an absolute match. Do you want to explain why your blood was there, next to drag marks leading to the garage door?" For a moment, Robert closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, hands trembling slightly. "You said your grandfather was Harold Denton, right?" he asked quietly. "He came to my house 2 days after Helen disappeared. He looked at me like he already knew everything. Maybe I should have told the truth then." Anna didn't respond, only signaling the recorder to start a new section. Robert began speaking, slowly, haltingly, as if each sentence carried the weight of years. "That night, I went to Helen's house. We argued. I wanted to reconcile, but she said she'd met someone else. I was angry, had been drinking earlier. When she turned away, I grabbed her arm, and she fell into the tool shelf in the garage. I didn't think I hit hard, but her head struck the iron table edge. She fell, no response. I panicked. I knelt, shook her, but blood kept flowing from the back of her head. I didn't know what to do." He paused, took a deep breath, voice hoarse. "I wiped the floor, used the handkerchief from my pocket, then put her in the trunk." Jennings asked, "And where did you take her?" Robert bowed his head. "To Millbrook. I'd worked there, knew about the abandoned wells. I thought, if I buried her there, no one would find her." He looked up, toward the one-way glass where Anna stood behind, voice choking. "I didn't mean to kill her. I was just afraid of being caught. I buried her with the ring because I couldn't leave it behind." The room fell deathly silent. Hal's pen scratched lightly but coldly. Hannah re-entered, placing photos of the excavated iron box and the remains with the ring in front of Robert. "Do you confirm this is where you buried Helen Barrington?" Robert nodded. "I used an iron box I bought at Winchester Hardware. I put her in it, covered her with fabric, then closed the lid. I thought, if I cleaned it well enough, people would believe she left." Hannah continued. "Then you left Winchester?" He replied. 2 years later. "I couldn't stand passing that house every day. I moved to New Mexico, thinking it would stay buried. But no, it's been here all along." He pointed to his chest, then bowed his head, hands shaking. The confession was fully recorded, lasting over 7 hours. By late afternoon, Robert agreed to sign the official statement, each page read back for confirmation. After signing, he looked at Helen's photo once more. "I should have gone to the police that night. I lived my whole life in fear." Hannah said nothing. She only looked at the final line in the record. "Confession obtained voluntarily, without coercion. Subject identified and admitted responsibility for the death and concealment of Helen Barrington." That evening, the investigative team completed the supplemental file, including audio recordings, handwritten confession, DNA results, excavated evidence, and Whitman's statement. The 212-page compiled report was stamped ready for prosecution and transferred to the Virginia Commonwealth Attorney's Office the next morning. In the Virginia Bureau of Investigation's final record, the conclusion was written in bold black ink. Subject: Robert L. Barrington has confessed to the unlawful killing and concealment of his spouse Helen Barrington. Case file #146521 completed. Referred to Commonwealth Attorney for formal indictment. After 42 years, the disappearance that haunted Winchester had a confession, not by chance, but through technology, perseverance, and a promise linking two Denton generations. In the small room where the interrogation ended, the light still shone, illuminating the black and white photo of the woman from long ago, who was finally given truth after nearly half a century buried in silence. After Robert Barrington signed the confession record, the entire case file was transferred to the Virginia State Medical Examiner's Office in Richmond for detailed autopsy of the remains and related evidence. This was a mandatory process to verify the confession's accuracy and strengthen the evidence chain before prosecution. Helen Barrington's remains, excavated from well #7, were kept intact in the sealed iron box to prevent cross-contamination. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Michael Harland and his forensic pathology team were responsible. They began with full-body X-rays, documenting bone condition, impact marks, and decomposition. Results showed a 7 centimeters crack in the right occipital region of the skull, consistent with a strong blunt force blow causing internal fracturing outward. The left ribs also had 2 classic fractures, signs of chest compression while alive, or immediately after the head injury. Microscopic analysis revealed vital reaction in the fractures. Bone tissue still had blood circulation when force was applied, proving Helen was alive in the initial moments after the blow. Soil, fabric, and metal samples from the box were separated. Technicians determined the floral fabric wrapping the body contained cotton linen fibers, matching a sample stored from Helen's 1963 home evidence, a curtain noted missing in the old report. This proved the perpetrator used household items to conceal the body. Additionally, chemical analysis on the box lid edge showed iron oxide mixed with sand and salt, reflecting long-term submersion, consistent with the Millbrook well environment. Hair recovered from the box bottom retained nuclear DNA, confirming 100% match with Helen Barrington's 1963 preserved genetic sample. The report detailed every parameter: blood type O, female, identical genetic markers. In the detailed description, Dr. Harlan noted, remains consistent with adult female, 29 years at time of death. Postmortem interval, approximately 42 years. Upon opening the skull, the team found brain tissue fully decomposed, but the inner skull membrane retained old hematoma traces, indicating cranial trauma directly caused loss of consciousness. However, what drew more attention were fine mud particles in the trachea and lungs, confirming the victim inhaled water or mud while alive or during agony. Combining the two factors, head trauma and mud in lungs, the forensic team concluded cause of death as cranial trauma leading to drowning asphyxiation from mud inhalation, meaning Helen did not die instantly from the blow, but was thrown into the well while still gasping. Dr. Harlan's 42-page report was sent to the Virginia Bureau of Investigation and Frederick County Prosecutor on November 19, 2005. In the conclusion, he wrote, "Cause of death, blunt force trauma to occipital region with subsequent drowning asphyxiation. Manner of death, homicide. Time of death, consistent with March 22, 1963. This fully matched Robert Barrington's confession, where he stated he pushed Helen, causing her to fall against the iron table in the garage before taking the body to Millbrook that night. Additionally, the estimated time of death, based on bone mineralization and decomposition environment, also aligned with the reported disappearance date. Other items like buttons, metal clasp, and curtain fabric were entered into the unified evidence chain. The chain of custody technical report by forensic engineer Karen Dwyer confirmed all evidence, from blood, handkerchief, iron box, bones, to wedding ring was sealed, opened, and transferred per regulation. The final line stated, "All materials remain under continuous custody from recovery to examination. No evidence of tampering or contamination." By combining the confession, DNA results, and forensic conclusions, the investigative team created an unbreakable evidence chain, sufficient to prove intentional violence, leading to Helen Barrington's death. Anna Denton and prosecutors reviewed the entire file before proceeding to indictment. In the compiled presentation to the Virginia Attorney General, she wrote, "Forensic evidence and confession mutually confirm. Victim sustained blunt trauma consistent with perpetrator's account. Sequence of events established: garage incident, concealment in metallic box, deposition at well #7. Evidence integrity verified. Recommended classification: premeditated homicide with concealment." That afternoon, the autopsy summary was released internally. The brief line on the cover, "Commonwealth of Virginia, Forensic Determination. Barrington Case 1963, Cause of Death, Cranial Trauma and Asphyxiation." In Anna's small office, crime scene photos and expert reports were stacked on top of each other. She looked at the conclusion sheet, printed with the words, "Manner of Death, Homicide," and felt that the case her grandfather had once called Winchester's open wound had finally closed with legal truth. 42 years of waiting, hundreds of pages of documents, thousands of hours of analysis, all now converged into a concise but absolutely decisive conclusion: Helen Barrington had been murdered. On November 21, 2005, after receiving the full forensic examination results, the Virginia State Prosecutor's Office officially issued an indictment against Robert L. Barrington, 73 years old, on 2 charges: second-degree murder and concealment of a body. The decision was signed by Chief Prosecutor Thomas Whitaker, who directly oversaw the entire reinvestigation process of the Barrington case. In the prosecution rationale section, Whitaker wrote, "Based on the suspect's voluntary confession, DNA examination results, forensic conclusion determining the cause of death as due to violence, and evidence proving intentional concealment of the body, all constitute intentional murder not reported." The case file was over 400 pages thick, including original documents from 1963, collected by Sheriff Harold Denton, modern DNA examination results, witness statements, forensic reports, and confirmation from witness Earl Whitman. All were officially stamped by the Virginia Attorney General's office and transferred to the Winchester Circuit Court for trial scheduling. The court appointed Judge John M. Harland, with over 30 years of experience in criminal trials, to preside over the case. Before the trial, the prosecution team held a meeting to review the entire chain of evidence. A representative from the Richmond Forensic Laboratory presented the preservation process for the original 1963 blood sample, proving the seal had never been violated. The chain of custody report confirmed that all evidence from the blood sample, the embroidered handkerchief, RB, the metal box, the wedding ring, to the bone samples, complied with continuous procedures, with clear records of time, responsible person, and storage location. This was the key factor ensuring the evidence would be accepted by the court. The Forensic Technical Laboratory also projected DNA comparison images, a twin chart between the blood sample in the garage and the control sample taken from Robert Barrington in New Mexico. The 0.01% error rate was determined according to FBI standards, sufficient to prove a direct link between the suspect and the crime scene. The expert examiners were listed in the court witness list, including Dr. Michael Harland, Karen Dwyer, and Inspector Anna Denton, representing the Virginia Bureau of Investigation. Meanwhile, the defense team, led by appointed attorney Douglas Price defending Robert, submitted a request to review the confession on the grounds that the client's health condition and advanced age may affect cognitive capacity. However, the Winchester court rejected this proposal after the State Forensic Psychology Institute concluded that Robert was fully lucid when confessing. The confession was made voluntarily without pressure. On November 29, the first pre-trial hearing was held at the Winchester Circuit Court. Robert Barrington, appeared in a gray prison uniform, moving slowly, thinner than when he was arrested. When the judge asked if he understood the indictment, he simply replied, "Yes, Your Honor." Local press was present in full, capturing images of the man who had lived in this town half a century ago, now facing charges of murdering his wife. Some elderly residents in the Winchester community recognized him. They had viewed the 1963 disappearance as a mystery that would never be solved. In the presentation, Prosecutor Whitaker affirmed, "We have physical biological evidence and a matching confession. This is not a case based on speculation or hazy memories. This is a solid chain of scientific evidence reinforced by witness testimony and forensic validation." He submitted to the court copies of the DNA results, a sketch of the excavation site at well #7, and photos of the metal box along with the evidence found inside. The preliminary jury reviewed the validity of each type of evidence. The forensic laboratory report was confirmed legal because the original sample was collected under procedures before 1965, a time when evidence collection regulations were not bound by current privacy protection laws, but still met requirements for continuity and integrity. Robert Barrington's confession was recognized as procedurally valid because it was audio recorded, video recorded, and witnessed by 2 legal witnesses. By the end of the month, the court set March 5, 2006, as the official trial opening date. A list of 14 witnesses was approved, including Earl Whitman, Dr. Michael Harland, Inspector Anna Denton, and 2 DNA laboratory technicians. The prosecution attorneys agreed to request the maximum sentence for second-degree murder, life imprisonment, plus penalty for body concealment. In an internal report sent to the State Attorney General, Anna Denton wrote, "The case has passed every evidentiary standard. Forensic chain intact, confession verified, physical evidence admissible, ready for trial." Outside, Winchester once again became the center of attention. After more than 40 years, the name Helen Barrington appeared on the front page of the Winchester Star with a large headline, "Cold Case, from 1963, heads to trial, husband to face murder charges." With the indictment approved and evidence fully vetted, the Helen Barrington case officially entered its final phase, the phase where justice would be determined in court. On the morning of March 5, 2006, more than 42 years after Helen Barrington disappeared, the Winchester Circuit Court officially opened the trial of case number 1465-21, with defendant Robert L. Barrington, 73 years old. The courtroom was packed with reporters, local residents, and those who had witnessed the disappearance in 1963. Many called it the trial of 2 centuries, as it bridged a case that began in an era when police used typewriters and ended in the age of DNA and digital technology. The defendant was led into the courtroom at 9 a.m., wearing a white shirt and gray sweater, his face gaunt, but his eyes still calm. To his left was defense attorney Douglas Price. To his right was Chief Prosecutor Thomas Whitaker, representing the state of Virginia. Presiding over the trial was Judge John M. Harland, who had handled many serious criminal cases. He emphasized right at the opening, the jury today is not only examining a criminal act, but also the journey of justice delayed for over 4 decades. The prosecution's presentation began with a powerful opening statement by Whitaker. He placed the first piece of evidence on the table, a black and white photo of Helen Barrington from 1963, the smiling face of a 29-year-old woman. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "this is the person whose life was taken on the night of March 22, 1963. The defendant buried the truth, buried her herself under the soil of Winchester for 42 years. He outlined the sequence of events from when Helen was reported missing, the failed search, the case being closed, to how DNA technology brought the case back to light. Photos of the excavation at well #7 and the metal box containing remains were projected on a large screen, silencing the courtroom. The prosecution called Inspector Anna Denton as the first witness. She detailed the reopening of the file, the discovery of the still-sealed blood sample, the DNA analysis matching Robert Barrington, and the testimony of witness Earl Whitman. When asked why she pursued this case, Anna replied, Not just because I am the granddaughter of the person who once investigated the case, but because I believe no mystery should be buried just because of time. Technology has helped the victim speak again. Witness Earl Whitman, now 82 years old, appeared with snow-white hair, assisted to the stand. He recounted the night he saw the black Ford F-100 truck stop near the Millbrook well. I saw a tall, large man bending down at the well mouth. When I shone my light, he quickly turned away and drove off. When I looked at the defendant's photo again, I knew it was the man I had seen. This testimony was reinforced by the prosecution with a map of the well's location and technical reports on the burial time of the body. Next, forensic pathologist Michael Harland presented the autopsy report. He affirmed the victim's cause of death was skull trauma, combined with asphyxiation from inhaling mud water. He pointed to the chart. No doubt this was a murder. The bone fractures show the victim was still alive when thrown into the well. The jury was silent. Many in the courtroom bowed their heads. When it was his turn, Attorney Douglas Price opened calmly. My client does not deny causing Helen Barrington's death, but he had no intent to kill. This was an accident during a conflict, and he has lived in torment for 40 years. He emphasized the defendant's age, health, and cooperation in confessing. However, the prosecution quickly countered, an accident cannot explain wiping away blood, hiding the body in a metal box, taking it to an abandoned well, and burying it. That is calculated behavior. The prosecution continued with DNA evidence. Forensic technician Karen Dwyer explained the PCR amplification process, proving the blood sample collected in the 1963 garage completely matched Robert's DNA. The twin chart appeared on the screen, 2 gene bands matching perfectly. A jury member whispered, "No mistake possible." In the defendant interrogation, Robert Barrington was allowed to speak for himself. He stood up, voice trembling. "I didn't mean to kill her. I loved Helen, even though we were separated. That night, I just lost control. When she fell, I panicked. I thought no one would believe me. I was wrong." The entire courtroom was silent. Anna, sitting in the prosecution row, looked at the man who had taken Helen's life and was also the reason her grandfather spent his life obsessed with the case. The final arguments lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented 23 pieces of physical evidence: blood sample, embroidered handkerchief, metal box, wedding ring area map, along with a video recording of the confession. The defense could only appeal for the jury's mercy. In his closing, Whitaker said, "No one has the right to decide another's life, then bury the crime under the ground and wait for time to erase it." The past 42 years were not forgiveness. They were a delay of justice. On March 12, 2006, the 12-member jury retired to deliberate. After nearly 5 hours of discussion, they returned with the verdict clearly recorded: guilty on all counts. The entire courtroom held its breath as the clerk read the sentence aloud. Defendant Robert L. Barrington is declared guilty of second-degree murder and concealment of a body. Sentence: life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Robert sat silently, no reaction. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he replied softly, "I know I deserve this. I hope finally Helen can rest in peace." The words echoed in the courtroom, where there were no more camera clicks, no whispers. Judge Harland concluded the trial with a brief remark: "Justice does not vanish. It only arrives late." Today we close a case that opened in 1963. Helen Barrington finally has been heard. He banged the gavel 3 times, the sound resounding in the silent space. Outside, Winchester's sky was overcast. Residents stood along the court steps, silent as the prison transport vehicle departed. In the prosecutor's office, Anna Denton signed the final line in the file: case #146521, closed. All that remained of a case spanning over 4 decades was now sealed in a few pages of records. But for those who had witnessed it, it was the end of a circle of justice, where truth finally triumphed over time. Immediately after Robert L. Barrington's sentence was announced in March 2006, the Virginia State Prosecutor's Office and the State Bureau of Investigation compiled an official operational report on the entire Helen Barrington case. A document considered a model for future cold case investigation. The report was nearly 200 pages thick, analyzing in detail the reasons the case lasted 42 years, the lucky factors that helped solve it, and the operational lessons drawn to improve the state's investigation procedures. The opening section of the report frankly points out the core reason the case could not be solved in 1963 lay in forensic technical limitations and the lack of modern crime scene management procedures. At that time, the Winchester police had no separate laboratory. All samples were processed manually and recorded by hand. Key evidence, such as the blood sample in the garage, shoe prints, or the embroidered handkerchief, was collected carefully according to the standards of the era, but the technology then was insufficient for in-depth analysis. Blood type testing could only determine type O, not trace individuals. Additionally, the absence of a national DNA database rendered those valuable samples meaningless for 4 decades. The report also notes that in the 1960s, investigators had no concept of chain of custody in the modern sense. Fortunately, Sheriff Harold Denton, grandfather of Inspector Anna Denton, preserved the files and evidence under better-than-average conditions. He required the blood sample to be sealed, clearly noted the date and collector, and stored it in a separate safe vault. This seemingly small detail proved decisive, allowing the sample to remain intact when reopened in 2005 and legally accepted in court. If that evidence had been lost or damaged, the Barrington case would never have been closed, the report states. The review team also highlighted weaknesses in initial crime scene management. Helen's garage area was not fully secured. Movement traces and tire marks were not recorded in detail. The image storage system at the time relied solely on black and white film photographs, which were prone to degradation and difficult to restore. Some photos were lost during storage, complicating later scene reconstruction. The lesson drawn: any crime scene, no matter how small, must be treated as the center of every investigation, independent of initial assumptions. Harold Denton had suspected Robert at the time, but lacked sufficient scientific evidence to support it. Part 2 of the report focuses on the value of long-term evidence preservation. The examination team recommends that Virginia maintain a minimum 50-year evidence storage system for all unsolved cases instead of destroying after 10 years as per the old regulation. Old cases only become cold cases until technology catches up. Evidence never becomes obsolete, only technology does, the conclusion emphasizes. Thanks to retaining the sealed blood sample, the Barrington case became a prime example, proving the importance of DNA and physical record storage. Additionally, the report analyzes the shift in investigative culture from an intuitive approach to one based on scientific data. In the 1960s, many investigations relied excessively on witness statements and personal inference. The Helen Barrington case shows that human memory easily fades and distorts over time. Without biological evidence, Earl Whitman's testimony 40 years later would only be supportive, not convincing. It was the DNA data that pushed the case beyond the boundary between suspicion and proof. The final part of the report proposes a new procedure for Virginia state investigators in handling missing persons and cold case investigation. The procedure includes 5 key points. 1. Immediate collection and sealing at the scene. Every blood, hair, tissue, fabric, or soil sample must be packaged separately, clearly labeled with time, location, collector, and code number. 2. Establish a parallel digital storage system. Crime scene photos, statements, maps, and forensic records must be scanned, encrypted, and periodically stored on state servers. 3. Periodic evidence review. Every 10 years, unresolved files must be reevaluated using current technology. 4. Nationwide DNA data integration. Ensure all biological samples are entered into the CODIS database as soon as eligible, avoiding localized sample loss. 5. Interdisciplinary training for investigators, combining forensics, psychology, and data analysis to enable investigative teams to approach cases multidimensionally and avoid missing details. Thanks to the Barrington case, Virginia officially approved the Cold Case Reformation Act 2007, expanding the budget for evidence preservation and digitization. The report ends with a short sentence, quoting words from Harold Denton, found in an old investigation journal. "Evidence does not speak, but it will wait, more patient than people." The Helen Barrington case thus became proof of an entire transitional phase in U.S. investigative work, from an era of technical limitations to one where DNA can speak for the deceased, and where justice, though delayed, can still be restored through intelligence, perseverance, and loyalty to the truth. After the Barrington operational report was widely released in late 2006, the Helen Barrington case officially became a model for cold case investigations across Virginia. The State Department of Justice and the State Bureau of Investigation decided to use this case file as a prime example in the training program for new forensic investigators, a program named Project Denton, honoring 2 generations of Denton investigators who began and ended the case after more than 4 decades. In training courses at the VBI Center in Richmond, the Barrington case is taught as a living lesson in perseverance, evidence management, and the value of forensic technology. Trainees study the 1963 blood sample preservation sequence, how Anna Denton reopened the file, the legally validated chain of custody process, and cross-state coordination in apprehending the suspect. The lesson concludes with a quote from the 2006 verdict. "Justice delayed is not justice denied. Justice delayed is still justice." The saying became the motto displayed in the main hallway of the training center. The first and most evident impact of the Barrington case was the expansion of the statewide evidence storage system. Previously, only 2 major counties, Fairfax and Norfolk, maintained standard-compliant evidence vaults. After 2007, the state approved over $8 million to build 6 additional temperature and humidity-controlled storage centers, ensuring biological evidence preservation for at least 75 years. These centers are linked by a shared encrypted data system, allowing evidence lookup from any county using only the case code. Winchester, the origin of the Barrington case, was selected as the pilot model. There, the old Frederick County storage vault was renovated into the cold case repository, with a dedicated section named the Helen Barrington Evidence Wing. Outside the storage area, a small brass plaque was engraved, "For cases yet unsolved, where time is not allowed to erase justice." Along with infrastructure improvements, the Barrington case also spurred a statewide review of old files. Between 2007 and 2008, VBI collaborated with local forensic labs to review over 1,200 unsolved missing persons and homicide cases. More than 180 old biological samples were re-extracted for DNA using next-generation PCR technology, leading to the reinvestigation or prosecution of at least 27 cases. Many incidents forgotten since the 1970s were reopened, thanks to standardized storage procedures inspired by the Barrington case. Another highlight of the case's impact was the shift in public perception of cold cases. Previously, old cases were often deemed valueless after a few decades, but the success of the Barrington case proved otherwise. As long as evidence is properly preserved, time is no longer a barrier. Community organizations in Virginia began advocating for funding for the Cold Case Fund, supporting DNA analysis, evidence storage, and personnel training. Local television even produced a short documentary titled "The Well That Spoke After 40 Years," recreating the investigation process to raise public awareness. Nationally, the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice also regarded the Barrington case as one of the model files for the National Cold Case Initiative. Parts of Virginia's DNA storage methods and evidence validity verification procedures were incorporated into the 2008 federal guidelines. An FBI representative for the Eastern region stated at a forensic conference, "The Barrington case shows that a small piece of evidence can span a century if preserved correctly. That is a victory of discipline, not just technology. In Winchester, Inspector Anna Denton, by then promoted to special supervisor at VBI, continued teaching and providing operational consultation. She proposed the creation of the Cold Case Database of Virginia, the state's first unified electronic storage system for unsolved cases, linking DNA data, crime scene photos, and forensic evidence. The project was piloted in 2008 and fully operational in 2009. In its first year, the database helped connect 14 cases statewide with suspects whose DNA profiles matched. But perhaps the deepest impact of the Barrington case lies not in numbers, but in the mindset of the new generation of investigators. In many training sessions, images of Well-7, the rusted metal box, and the Ra and H 1955 engraving on the wedding ring are projected as symbols of faith in the patience of justice. Every investigator graduating from the cold case course in Richmond receives a small commemorative card, front side showing the metal box, back side engraved with Harold Denton's words, "Evidence does not speak, but it will wait." Thanks to this case, Virginia became one of the pioneering states in old case investigations. The number of solved cold cases nearly tripled in the first 3 years after the reforms. The State Department of Justice's 2009 report concluded, Case #146521 did not just close one case, it opened a new generation in investigative science. The perseverance and systematization of procedures from the Barrington case are the foundation for justice no longer depending on time. And from then on, in Virginia's criminal investigation field, the name Barrington no longer only evoked a crime, but also became a symbol of belief that no matter how long the time, a carefully preserved piece of evidence can still bring justice back for the victim, for the truth, and for those who waited for it in silence. More than 4 decades after the March afternoon in 1963, when Helen Barrington was last seen at her small house on the outskirts of Winchester, the journey of Case #146521 ended with a period not only for justice, but also for the memory of an era. The first pages of the file bear the scribbled handwriting of Sheriff Harold Denton, female, age 29, missing under uncertain circumstances. And 42 years later, the same line was crossed with a final red stroke by his granddaughter, Inspector Anna Denton, with the note, "Case closed. Solved. 2006. That journey, when reviewed in the Virginia Bureau of Investigation's summary report, is likened to a complete cross-section of the evolution of American criminal investigation from an era reliant on intuition and testimony to the age of DNA and digital data retrieval. It all began with what seemed an ordinary disappearance. A woman vanished without a trace, leaving only her car parked at the hospital lot and a house smelling of bleach. In 1963, technology and investigative procedures were insufficient to recognize it as a murder disguised. No DNA, no digital cameras, no national database, only notebooks, maps, and professional instinct. But thanks to the meticulous notes, careful sample preservation, and sense of duty from the first generation like Harold Denton, the evidence survived decades. A scrap of fabric, a blood stain, an embroidered handkerchief, RB, seemingly trivial items that became the key to solving the case after nearly half a century. When PCR technology and DNA storage emerged, they spoke, proving that truth does not vanish. It only awaits the moment to be heard. From 2005, when the Cold Case Virginia program was launched, the Barrington file became one of the first selected to test modern DNA technology. The analysis results matched Robert Barrington, the man once questioned and who left Winchester in 1965, opening a new chapter. From there, the case was revived, surviving witnesses were verified, the old scene was excavated, and a well-forgotten for nearly half a century became the place that revealed the truth. The 2006 trial marked not only the end of a case, but also a symbol of professional faith that every investigator, regardless of generation, continues the work of those before them. Without Harold Denton preserving the blood sample, there would be no Anna Denton uncovering the truth. Without the investigative team's perseverance, there would be no perfectly matching DNA evidence connecting past and present, error and justice. The file summary clearly states, initiation date, March 23, 1963. Resolution date, March 12, 2006. Investigation duration, 42 years. Cause of death, skull trauma and asphyxiation. Perpetrator, Robert L. Barrington, sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. File status, solved, closed permanently. When young investigators reread the file, many realize it is not just an operational document, but a story of human perseverance against the limits of time. It proves that in investigative work, there is no hopeless, only not enough data yet. Every unsolved case is a reminder that justice still has work to do, and that evidence, though silent, always awaits someone patient enough to listen. In 2007, when Virginia released its list of landmark cold cases in history, the Helen Barrington case was ranked first, with the note, "The case that redefined persistence." The story from Winchester spread to police academies nationwide, becoming a research topic on evidence storage techniques, classical DNA analysis, and criminal psychology. File #146521 now rests in the Virginia State Crime Archives, preserved in a secure glass case, accompanied by a photo of Helen Barrington next to Inspector Anna Denton's comment, "Missing 1963. Found 2006. Justice is not measured by speed, but by the endurance of memory and faith." As the final pages of the file are sealed, it records not only a solved case, but also marks a transitional phase in American investigative work, where a small blood stain left on a handkerchief becomes the bridge between two generations, and where justice, though 42 years late, is still called by its rightful name. The story of the Helen Barrington case is not just a decades-long investigation, but also a profound reflection of the core values of modern American society, where justice, perseverance, and faith in science remain the foundation for protecting people from oblivion. In this case, what restored justice was not luck, but the consciousness of preserving truth, from the way Sheriff Harold Denton carefully sealed the blood sample in 1963, to when his granddaughter, Anna Denton, found it and used modern DNA technology to prove the killer's guilt. In today's society swept up in speed, social media, and short attention spans, this story reminds us that perseverance and integrity remain irreplaceable values. It teaches that every action, no matter how small, can yield great results if done with responsibility and faith. For the American people, it is also a reminder that justice sometimes arrives late, but never vanishes, as long as we continue to preserve evidence, memory, and the desire for truth. In everyday life, this can mean something very simple. Do the right thing, even when no one is watching. Believe in the progress of knowledge, because science, like DNA technology in the Barrington case, is the tool that makes our society fairer. And above all, remember that a strong society is not built on quick victories, but on people who do not give up against time. Just as the two generations of the Denton family did, quietly, persistently, and loyal to the truth, to the very end. Thank you for joining us in following the journey to find justice for Helen Barrington, a testament that truth, though buried for 4 decades, will one day come to light. If you are interested in cold cases and equally determined investigative journeys like this, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories.